Live in our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be taking a look at the New Mexico State Aggies, who finished 10-5 last season. They capped off their season with an appearance in the New Mexico Bowl versus Fresno State. They wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring game on April 6th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is the New Mexico State Aggies TV play-by-play broadcaster. You can catch him on TV doing play-by-play for the WAC, Conference USA, and NCAA championships. In 2018, he was tabbed top 30 sportscaster under 30 by Sportscaster Talent Agency of America. He is Adam Young. Adam can be found at YoungPBP on X. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Appreciate you having me. It feels like football is getting closer and closer, so excited to talk some football today.
Yeah, hopefully. New Mexico State, when do they start? Next week, 2 weeks?
Yeah, we're,
or New Mexico State.
Spring ball finished late April. Guys are still gone. I think they're still 2 weeks away, and then kicking off August 31st, yeah.
We are right around the corner. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you into being interested in sports broadcasting and ended up getting a gig there with the Aggies doing play-by-play?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to be a broadcaster since I was in middle school, really since I was a little kid. And, so this dream started a long time ago, and it's taken me to the Southwest. I've been here for 9+ years and honored to get the chance to do 7 different sports here. I've been the director of broadcasting for our property as well. And then, do a lot of freelancing gigs, and they allow me to do that. And you mentioned some of the stops that I've had doing that with some conference championships. I called the Division II National Championship last year for volleyball on television, and met a lot of great people along the way. And, forever grateful to have these opportunities that I get to call games.
Well, the Aggies have a new head coach. Jerry Killen resigned. He's now with Vanderbilt as a consultant. In his place is Tony Sanchez. Sanchez was previously the wide receivers coach there at New Mexico State. What can you tell us about Coach Sanchez and what he brings to the tables here for the Aggies?
Well, he's an alum, so that means a lot to the fan base and to the community. I mean, he played for the Aggies. He was a wide receiver in the 90s, returned 2 years ago as an assistant coach when Jerry Kill was hired. And we always said he was overqualified, I think, to be just the wide receivers coach because he has a really impressive resume. Going back to his days as the head coach at Bishop Gorman, which is a powerhouse in Vegas. Then he was the head coach at UNLV. So he's been an FBS head coach before. And that was crucial whenever, Jerry left, decided to step away and resign and eventually into an advisory role at Vanderbilt. They needed to make a hire really quick, especially with the way the transfer portal works nowadays. So to have a guy on your staff already like Tony Sanchez, I think it was a pretty easy decision to promote him. It's gone really well. I love what he did in the transfer portal. I know we're going to talk about some of the departures and some of the additions. And, right now, Jerry Kill used to always call it paper tigers. Whenever you recruited guys, you don't know what they're going to be until you get them on the field. They're paper tigers until practice starts, and that's the same right now. But I like what they have on paper. They're coming off one of the best seasons in program history, one of the best 2-year stretches in program history. So the excitement is high. There's, of course, question marks because there are so many newcomers, but really excited about the pieces they added both before spring ball and then post spring ball as well.
Well, often happens when you get a new head coach, that means new assistants and coordinators. The Aggies are no different in that regard. Coach Sanchez appoints Tyler Wright as the new offensive coordinator. He was previously the special teams coordinator and the tight ends coach there for the Aggies. Can you describe what type of offense that Coach Wright's going to bring and use here at New Mexico State?
Well, and we'll talk about this later too. Personnel-wise, it seems like the strength of the team is probably going to be the offensive line. So I do expect them to run the ball a lot, which is what they've done the last 2 years. Jerry Kill always had 4 or 5 running backs he could use, and it seems like they're going to have that again this year with a really talented, experienced offensive line. And then there are some question marks at quarterback. Who's going to be the starting quarterback? Will it be a couple guys early on in the year? Will somebody win the job outright going into the season? So I think going into it, it seems like it's going to be a run-oriented offense, but we've yet to see Tyler Wright as an offensive coordinator, so we'll kind of see that on the fly. And Tyler is he's a young coach, but he's a rising star. I've been really impressed by him the last couple of years on the staff. He did a really good job with special teams, did a really good job at the tight ends. They were used heavily in the offense the last 2 years, so excited what he does in this new role.
Well, let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that's the quarterback. Last year started Diego Pavia and the backup, Blaise Berlowitz, both off to Vanderbilt. They brought in Kentucky quarterback Deuce Hogan, and after the spring brought in UTEP quarterback Jake McNamara, and then Wake Forest QB Santino Marucci. What should we make of this quarterback room? You said there wasn't a quarterback one yet. Kind of what are you hearing and seeing about the starter there for week 1 against SEMO?
That's the position everybody's talking about because Diego Pavia, especially last year, I mean, he was the guy. 2 years ago, won the job early. Gavin Frake stepped in for a couple of weeks. It was kind of in and out, and then Pavia was the guy late. Last year, you knew going into the year that Diego Pavia was the guy. And then he transfers. Him and Blaise Berlowitz both go to Vanderbilt. Eli Stowers was going to come back as a tight end. He goes to Vanderbilt as well. Eli was used a little bit at quarterback last year. And then Gavin Frakes goes to Virginia. So essentially your 4 guys at quarterback last year are gone, and you're trying to fill that room up with newcomers. Deuce Hogan, I think, is probably the biggest name in that room, right? I mean, he was at Kentucky. He's been at Iowa as well, but he hasn't played much at the FBS level as far as games are concerned. So, it's a loaded quarterback room in which they did add a lot of new pieces. Like they do have some guys who have played at the JUCO level, but FBS experience is a little bit light in that room. So, it's going to be so important those first couple of weeks of camp that somebody really excels at the quarterback position. I do think the offensive line is going to help because there is so much experience and depth and talent. That'll help that quarterback transition to a new quarterback, but that's certainly a room that has a lot of potential. It's just who will emerge as the guy if there is a guy going into the year.
Do you feel that Hogan has a leg up since he was there before there in the spring before everybody else comes in, learning that playbook and things like that?
I do think it helps, but Awad and Nunez were also there, and then Marucci was added post-spring ball. So they kept on adding. I mean, they were not satisfied, if you will, where they were coming out of spring ball at quarterback. So I'll be honest. I don't think anybody has an edge. I think it's an open competition going into camp, and whoever's at their best will win the job. And then we're going to see Tony Sanchez's style as a head coach as well, and Tyler Wright's style as an OC. Are they comfortable playing multiple guys in a game? That goes coach to coach. Jerry Kill hated that. He did not want to play 2 guys in a game, but sometimes he had to. And that's not really his style, but he did. So we'll see how they approach it. Last year, they had packages for Eli Stowers at quarterback. Even though Diego Pavia was exceptional, there were games where they pulled him, in the red zone or near the goal line, and they bring in Stowers to run the option because he was so effective in that role. So maybe they'll have somebody do that as well.
Well, let's move over to the running game. They lose about 77% of their rushing yardage from last season. What did the staff do to address those losses?
They did a really good job in the portal in that running back room because a lot of those losses were relatively late. Coach Langford, who was the running backs coach, was promoted to offensive coordinator at one point, and then he went to Vanderbilt, so he was really only the OC for a couple of weeks. But when he was promoted, it seemed like that entire running back room was probably going to stay because he was the running backs coach. A lot of those guys went in the portal. They were able to keep a couple. Monte Watkins is the guy to keep your eye on. Monte is one of the fastest guys around the country. Hasn't had a lot of carries. You would see stat lines for him sometimes where he'd have 4 carries for 90 yards in a game. Just didn't touch the ball a lot, but when he touched it, he was explosive. He was averaging around 12 yards per rush for most of last year. So I do think Monte will get more carries. He's the most experienced running back in that room as far as returners. Tim Gans is another guy who, when he's been given touches the last couple of years, he's done a lot with them. Lorenzo McMillan has been around for a handful of years. He's gone through a couple of coaching changes, and he's stuck around. And then they added a couple of talented running backs with high-level FBS experience in the portal. So I do think they have 4 or 5 guys that can carry the load behind a really good offensive line.
Well, what have you seen or heard with this new staff that you kind of expect those carries to get divvied up? Are we going to have an RB1 workhorse like we did last year, or will it be this committee approach? And if so, is that a 50-50, 60-40? You said there's 4 or 5 guys. Do they split up 20, 20, 20, 20, 20? Like what are you hearing, or what have you been able to see so far?
It's hard to figure out because some of those pieces they added after spring ball. So a lot of times you get a really good feel for what the team's going to look like and how things will shake out by watching spring ball. And with the way the transfer portal works and, with the portal reopening after spring ball, a lot of times it's hard to figure out. I do expect Watkins to get way more carries than he got the last couple of years. I do think that's something that will go up. The question is, how many carries can Monte Watkins handle during the course of a game? Is he going to get 15 or 20? Possibly, but he's only been getting 5 or 6 a game the last couple of years. And, he always finds a way to do something with them, but he's not that power back. He's more of a perimeter runner who gets out to the edge and uses his speed to his advantage. So how does he handle a long season as the go-to guy? But they do have options.
That's something, you might only get 5 carries and you're really productive with them. And then when you get 20, you're not as productive because, you got more of this volume base. Sure. And you also expect, you're not going to be as productive when you get 20 as, when you have maybe that 5, 8, 10 touches. So that makes sense.
And I go back to the offensive line constantly because this is the heart and soul of the team. And ever since I've been here, we've never said that about the offensive line. But Andrew Mitchell, who's the offensive line coach, has been amazing with that unit the last couple of years. So there's a lot of excitement about those guys and what they did last year and then what they can build on going into this year.
Well, the Aggies pass catchers will look quite a bit different here in 2024. Now, holistically speaking, I'm talking wide receivers, tight ends, running backs. They lost 8 of their top 9 receiving options. What will this room of pass catchers look like here in 2024?
Cordell David's a name to watch. Cordell has been around the last couple of years, and he's stuck with this staff. And, Cordell probably going into last year might have been the go-to guy. Statistically, didn't put up the numbers that maybe he had 2 years ago, but he had some really good receivers around him. A guy like Trent Hudson, who transferred to Mississippi State, who had a really good year, especially in the red zone, catching touchdown passes last year. So Cordell's key. Donovan Faupel, who, if you and I talked this time last year, I would not have brought up Donovan's name, but he was a true freshman who bursted onto the scene and earned some playing time and did a lot with it last year. PJ Johnson has a world of talent. He's been around for a while. In fact, he was here 2 coaching staffs ago. And PJ is from Louisiana, just raw talent. He's as good as it gets, but he just hasn't played a ton game experience on the field. So, PJ is certainly a guy who could have a breakout year. They do have to replace a lot. Tony Sanchez was the wide receivers coach last year. So I do think he will still have a role with that unit, maybe more so than others, just because of his experience the last 2 years with that crew.
Now, based off of, what you saw last year, and I'm assuming maybe it'll carry over, maybe it won't to the offensive coordinator, but what can you describe for us how we expect to see these tight ends being utilized in Wright's offense?
That's a good question. And, last year, Tyler had 2 really good tight ends. Tomas Whitford was about as experienced as it gets collegiately. So Tomas was a leader, blocked well, caught touchdown passes, high character. He was everything you want in one of your go-to guys. And he was the number 1 tight end. And then Ron Tiavasue transferred in from Utah State, and Ron had a really good year. So they had two guys they could really count on last year. Trevor Stevens, if healthy, is the top returning tight end. We've seen flashes from him the last 2 years on what he can do. He battled an injury last year, and then they might need some other guys to step up. But, I think part of this, too, is how much will a Tyler Wright, Tony Sanchez offense use the tight end? Because Jerry Kill wanted to use the tight end a lot. But you go back to the coaching staff before Jerry, it was an air raid offense that didn't use the tight end. So it changes coaching staff to coaching staff. I do think they will utilize the tight end, and I think Trevor Stevens is the go-to guy in that group.
All right, so week one, lining up here at starting wide receivers and tight ends, is it safe to say it's that Stevens, David, Cordell David, Donovan, is it Falpel, and then P.J. Johnson? Is that?
Well, I think it depends on, guys emerging. Like I said, Donovan Falpel, at this time last year, we weren't talking about him. And guys emerge in camp. And with the transfer portal, it's so hard to predict nowadays. If all those wide receivers were back, if the portal wasn't a thing, I think we'd have a clear vision for what it was going to look like. But part of this era now that we're in is what makes camp so exciting. It's an open slate for a lot of guys, right? I mean, there's a lot of jobs up for grabs, and there's probably guys that we will not talk about today that end up having really good years because maybe they came out of nowhere, they were under the radar, maybe they were a late addition and started to grasp the offense a little bit later than others, and it turned into a positive for them.
Well, let's talk about this O-line, and we talked about it on paper. This looks like the strongest unit on the offensive side of the ball. They bring back the entire O-line, which is, I think, in all of the episodes of the series that we have done, there's maybe been one other team that has everybody coming back. So this is not too many teams are doing this. And then they have another few others like deep that have played some meaningful snaps last year. Like, how did that unit look in the spring, and are they ready to roll in this new offense?
Yeah, I said earlier, this is the first time since I've been here where I've talked a lot about the offensive line going into a year, because I think that high of that group and their coach, Andrew Mitchell's their coach, and you talk about a unit all returning and not going in the portal. A big reason, and probably the key reason, is because their coach is still here, Andrew Mitchell, and those guys love playing for him. And he's added a couple other responsibilities, assistant head coach, run game coordinator, stuff like that. Kanan Yarrow is kind of the key part of that offensive line. He's the center. He's getting a lot of preseason accolades, deservedly so. He's a great young man, great player. And then Shiaz Pete at left tackle is a guy who a lot of scouts think will play on Sundays. He's 6'8", well over 300 pounds. I mean, he's a big dude, and he continues to grow. He was a little raw when he came here, and Andrew Mitchell's done just marvelous work with him. Louis Canepa had a really good year last year. Excited about what he can do in the future. Jacob Golden's another guy who transferred in last year from Boise State, who battled some injuries last year, but when healthy, he's really good. So that's why I'm so excited, too, about what the offense can do, what the run game can do, is because it all goes back to O-line play. And, if you said one sure thing going into the year, that's probably it. Like, I think the offensive line is going to be really good.
And you mentioned Pete. He was also CUSA first team all conference last year. So, I mean, he had his accolades there last year. Probably, comes back hungry this year, and maybe they'll be running the ball a lot to the left. I don't know. Yeah,
he is. You see him on campus, and it's hard to believe like how big he is in person. I mean, it's 6'8". It's all is 6'8", well over 300 pounds, and he's still improving. And he's really taken to coaching well. Good teammate. He's one of the guys that's being represented at Media Day today. So he's at Media Day at Conference USA for New Mexico State. Him and Buda Paletti on defense. So excited about what he does this year and down the road as well.
All right. If you have to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who would that be?
Oh boy. I'd probably say Monte Watkins, and that's, maybe an answer that, is an easy one because he did have a really good year last year in the limited carries that he had. I just feel like he's going to have a bigger role, and he's only touched on the surface of what he can be. I'm really excited to see what Watkins can do with double-digit carries consistently. It's elite speed. I know the coaches are glad he stayed, and he's the guy. And then if you wanted a second one too, I'll give you a second one. It's going to be another running back. Tim Gans has played a little bit, and when he's played, he always does something. And I think Tim will have a bigger role, and he's another guy too that could have a big year.
Well, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. And as you might expect, there with that new head coach leading the way there for the Aggies, there's a new defensive coordinator there, and that's Joe Morris. He comes to New Mexico State from Sam Houston State, where he most recently served as their defensive coordinator. What style of defense can we expect to see from Coach Morris?
Yeah, I mean that's to be seen a little bit, right? With personnel changes, kind of learning on the fly. Some of the personnel they had during spring ball, it's different now. You add guys, you lose guys after spring ball. But a lot of people around here are really excited about what Joe Morris can do. That Sam Houston defense last year, they were tenacious. I think back to their BYU game last year when it was 14-0. They lost, but their defense kept them in the game. Sam Houston was here at Aggie Memorial Stadium last year. The New Mexico State offense kind of had their way in the first half, and then he made some second half adjustments, and the offense for the Aggies could not push the football. So he impressed a lot of people during the course of last season, and a lot of the personnel is new. Nate Dreiling did a wonderful job with the defense the last couple of years. If you ask me what was the biggest change going from the struggles of the program up until 2 years ago when the program started to flip, I think the play of the defense as a whole was a big part of it. You didn't have to score 40 points to win a game anymore. You could win a game 20-17 or win a game 17-10 because that defense was so good. And, Nate Dreiling had great players playing for that defense, and a lot of those guys are gone. So I think we'll get some of those questions answered early on during fall camp.
Well, let's talk about that personnel that's going to be running Coach Morris's defense. Let's start with the defensive line. I'm trying to keep track of all of the transfers, and if I'm counting correct, they lost 5 guys to the portal, but they also gained 5 guys from the portal. Tell me, what do I need to know about this defensive line and what we can expect from them in 2024?
Well, that was one of the things that really helped the defense have success the last couple of years. Is they did a really good job of getting to the quarterback. They ran a defense in which a linebacker was actually on the line for Nate Dreiling. He called this position the stud position, and Gabe Peterson ran that position. And Gabe transferred to Houston, but they really got after the quarterback. And the key piece that does return is Buda Paletti. He's the other guy who's at media day today for New Mexico State. Buda played a little bit as a freshman, had a breakout year last year. Was kind of under the radar out of California in high school. And, Buda's a name that a lot of people around here know well. And I think, he could have a breakout year. And he's probably one of the key guys that needs to be a leader on that defensive line out of the gate.
All right. Well, I kind of put Paletti there in that linebacking group. I mean, I think by the roster, he's on an O-line, but he might play more defensive lineman there in that stud position. But the linebacking group loses their leading tackler, and I'm going to call him an Iron Man from a year ago, Keyshawn Elliott. He played 900. He dang near played about 1,000 snaps. That's just like amazing, especially, people coming on and off the field and getting hurt and whatnot. So that was pretty amazing. But while this room lost its fair share, they have guys like Sone Apiu, and then, like you said, Buda Paletti, they're returning. They also brought in Avery Morris from UTSA after spring ball. What can we expect from this room in 2024?
Sone Apiu, another guy, kind of like Donovan Faupel, who, last year at this time, nobody was really talking about him, and played a lot early and just started to gain the trust of the defensive staff and had a really good year. So, I think his role is definitely bigger now. The person you referenced earlier was Keyshawn Elliott, who was everywhere last year. I mean, he was an Iron Man. He was a workhorse. And New Mexico State has always had good linebackers. A couple of years ago, they had Chris Ojo and Trevor Brohard. And this time last year, the question was, well, how do you replace those two? Can Keyshawn Elliott handle the load? He did. Keyshawn's gone now to Arizona State. So next man up might be Sone Alpiu. Tyler Martinez had a lot of snaps a year ago. I think he'll be a big part of that linebacker crew as well. So that's a big group, going into the year. That's, of course, an important group, and there just isn't a lot of FBS experience in that room. They added a lot of pieces, but somebody has to step up outside of the returners like Martinez and Alpiu.
Well, this defensive backfield was hit hard between the portal and graduation. They lost their number 2 through number 5 leading tacklers from a year ago via the portal. Dylan Early and Keontae Glinton are some of those guys that are coming back with the most game experience here in 2024. What are you expecting from them in the secondary in 2024?
Having those two guys back is key. Dylan's had a really good career. Keontae was at Wyoming first and then came here. So, it's a different coaching staff. So, and it's likely a different scheme. So it's hard to say that continuity is huge. But I think having somebody who's played at this level, who's been in this program, who knows what the grind is like, that'll certainly help that crew. They were really good the last 2 years. Miles Rouser kind of came onto the scene a year ago. Andre Selden, who was a key part of that secondary the last 2 years and transferred after Jerry Kill left. Andre was at Utah State, and Andre, I don't know if you read this, but he tragically passed away last weekend. An accident, a diving accident at a lake in Utah. Andre was just a wonderful player and wonderful human being. So our thoughts and prayers are with his family. So New Mexico State, has had to replace a lot of guys in that secondary because of the portal going back to December. But having Early and Glinton back, those are two key pieces. Josiah Cox is a name that's come up a lot ever since spring ball. So that crew is going to have to be good, and it goes hand in hand, right? If the line can put pressure on the quarterback, it makes the secondary better as well. And it just seemed like that defense made big play after big play down the stretch during that 10-win season a year ago.
Do you anticipate some of those transfers that they brought in the winter to make an impact for the Aggies in 2024? I know you mentioned Cox there that comes in from Arizona State, but is there anybody else that you really anticipate stepping up there?
Yeah, they're going to have to. I mean, there's going to have to be players that step up, probably some JUCO guys. And that's the thing about, JUCO players, whether you bring them in early or after spring ball, there is a learning curve. So I've seen it before where, somebody is there for spring ball and maybe doesn't have it click until fall camp, or somebody that misses spring ball and just gets fall camp, and it just takes deeper into the season for them to kind of understand things and make that transition. The key part of the defense the last 2 years, I tell people this all the time, one of the biggest reasons why the defense was so successful is because they had depth. They were 2 or 3 deep at every single position, and it didn't matter who was on the field. You could give guys a rest and keep them fresh for the fourth quarter, and there wasn't a drop-off. So building depth is so crucial at this level, and it's really hard to do at the group of 5 level. In the really good group of 5 programs, that's the separator. Is they have depth on defense. And that's a big reason why New Mexico State was so strong defensively the last 2 years.
So if you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season here in 2024, who are you picking?
I think Buda Paletti is probably the obvious choice because he's been a guy the last couple of years, but hasn't been a star. And we've been able to see him play, and he showed glimpses of what he can be. Noah Arinze is a guy who transferred in a couple of years ago from Oklahoma. Heralded recruit. He's 6'6", he's 260. He looks the part. I think if he can put things together, he could really have a big year. So that's another guy to keep your eye on.
All right. Well, with fall camp coming up, and you kind of mentioned, some of the strength previously have been the defensive depth. what are, some position group or groups that you feel is the most concerning?
Well, I think you look at defense, probably linebacker, D-line, where you have to replace a lot of players. I think offensively, the O-line's in good shape. The quarterback room, I still think, will figure itself out. Running back room, good. Wide receivers, they're replacing a lot, but I'm not sure how much they're going to have to throw the football this year, especially early on. So I think defense, especially on the line and at linebacker. But they're excited about the guys they brought in. That's the wonder of the portal is sometimes, it's addition by subtraction in some cases. And there were some really good players available late in the portal because players can get lost in the portal sometimes, right? Maybe you're looking at how many stars they had in high school or where they came from. Maybe a guy that was at a JUCO is a better option than somebody who only played in 3 games at, let's say, Oklahoma a year ago. Because people forget about him. So they do have options, in fall camp. I just think now more than ever with the day and age of the transfer portal is really, really important for those couple of weeks to get ready for the season opener.
Now, talking about that transfer portal, I don't know what the scholarship situation there is at New Mexico State. Are they pretty much set there going into the fall unless somebody falls into their laps, or what is there anything that they're looking to add?
I think they're set, but I'm not 100% sure. It's been crazy because I've never seen it like this, where recruiting is still going on, pretty long after spring ball, right? I mean, with the portal reopening after spring ball, it just puts an interesting wrinkle in everything. So there's been more shuffling than I've ever seen, of course, coaches, players. But I remind folks, New Mexico State is losing players to the Power Conference, right? I mean, a lot of the players went to Vanderbilt. They had a guy go to Syracuse, a guy go to Virginia. They're losing players to Power Conference schools. So that's what happens when you win, right? And players have success, and it's a larger. There's more eyeballs on the program now because of the Conference USA TV deal. So a lot more people get to see New Mexico State football, which is great. But when you have success and more people see you, sometimes that leads to you losing players, during the transfer portal era.
Yep. Well, we talked about, maybe some opportunities there that they might be looking at, but what would you say is the main strength of this team going into 2024?
I think it's definitely offensive line. Barring injuries, the offensive line is set. And they have pretty good depth behind those guys. It's so key on offense, right? Especially when you're going through a transition at quarterback, especially when you lost some key running backs, to have that stabilizing force up front. And I joked with Keenan Yarrow, the returning center, on a podcast a while back. I said, we don't talk about the offensive line when you're doing well. Unfortunately, the media talks about the offensive line when they're struggling. And I said, we didn't talk about you guys enough last year because you were so consistent. You played so well. So I don't care who your quarterback is, who your running back is. If your offensive line is disjointed, if you get a lot of pre-snap penalties, it's going to set the offense back. And I just don't anticipate that being a problem. I feel like that crew is really going to help with the transition at both positions. And I remind folks as well that Diego Pavia, when he came here, it wasn't like Diego was somebody that everybody was talking about. We were his only FBS offer. So there's a chance that one of those quarterbacks can emerge and be a go-to guy and, be that diamond in the rough that nobody was talking about going into the year.
Well, we talk about guys going to P4 schools. When it comes to the recruitment of new players, the retention of existing players, because you have to do that kind of throughout the season, it seems like. How has the NIL and the transfer portal impacted New Mexico State?
Well, it's impacted it a lot, but the NIL collective's been really good. Paul Grindstaff runs the collective, and Paul's an all-star. I mean, they were ahead of this, It wasn't like they were running behind. This was coming. Paul was on it. They do really well, especially for Conference USA Group of 5. So that's not a problem. It's just, it's hard for a Group of 5 to compete with an SEC program when those SEC programs are, recruiting your players that win the portal. So, I don't think New Mexico State is ever going to worry about an SEC program taking players. It would be an issue if they were losing key players to Group of Five schools, and that's not the case. It's players that are going to P5 programs. I mean, the fourth string quarterback is at a power conference program. So it says a lot about what the program did the last 2 years, especially last year. The collective's been unbelievable, and the coaching staff's been unbelievable at losing players, and then finding a way to regroup and see what you need, and then kind of retooling the roster on the fly, because that's not an easy process.
Well, it seems more and more like the demands of a head coach are really turning into more of like this general manager type role between the recruiting, player retention, fundraising, and less of the X's and O's role. I know Sanchez, has been with the team for a while, but not too long as head coach. What do you see happening there at New Mexico State? Is there like a general manager type role already there that he can focus on the X's and O's, or is he that general manager type person going out doing all that fundraising and whatnot?
He's doing a lot of that. I mean, it almost feels like he's working, 24 hours a day, every single day. He's always on the go. They do a lot of fundraising stuff with NIL supporters, local sponsors, and he's always there. He's visible. He's a great public speaker, and he's extremely likable. And part of that, too, is he's an alum. If somebody from the outside comes in, they can talk the talk and, maybe speak the lingo. But, I mean, his blood, sweat, and tears are in this place. I recall 2 years ago, we did an interview with him after practice one day, and it was rivalry week. They were about to play UTEP that weekend, and he came over and he had a bloody nose. I mean, his nose was cracked. And I asked him what happened. I said, "Coach, you're bleeding." He said, "I know." And I said, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Well, I just did a post-practice speech to the team, and I got so fired up, I headbutted one of the guys, and he had a helmet on." And he's like, "I'm good though. We're playing UTEP Saturday." So, he gets it, and you can't teach that to somebody who's coming in from the outside. I mean, his blood, sweat, and tears are in that stadium, and now he gets the chance to be the head coach at his alma mater, which is awfully cool and so rare.
And like you said, you can't fake that. It's and people can see through fake, and they buy in when they see stuff like that.
Yeah, it's so rare to have an alum leading a program, and it's so rare to have an alum already on the staff ready to lead the program if there was a coaching switch. And that's what happened. I mean, Jerry Kill left, and it was during Christmas. I think it might have been like Christmas Eve or the day after Christmas, but it was right around Christmas. I mean, I was at a Christmas party when the news broke, and it wasn't long after that Tony Sanchez was the guy named as the head coach. And it's really hard to be able to promote somebody like that with FBS head coaching experience. And, he was ready to go. So, it was a decision that was probably pretty easy for athletics director Mario Mocha.
Well, given all the changes in coaching staff and personnel, what does success look like in 2024 for the Aggies?
That's a good question, because I've seen a lot of that on social media, and the expectations now are so high. When I got here, it was 3-9, it was 2-10, it was 3-9. Rarely did they get to 4-8, and then you win 7 games 2 years ago, and then the expectations start to tick up. Then we're expecting bowl games. Well, last year they get to 10 pretty early, right? They get to double-figure wins early. They were getting top 25 votes. They punched their ticket to the Conference USA title game relatively early. So, I think those are the expectations now. And if you told somebody 3 years ago, "Hey, we're going to Conference USA and we want to get championships," and I think a lot of people would be like, "Okay, slow your roll a little bit." But that's the expectation now. I mean, you get there and you taste it, you get the double-figure win. So I know from the fans' perspective, from the players' staff perspective, it's get back to a bowl game again and compete for a conference championship.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to share or think that we should know about this 2024 New Mexico State Aggie football team?
It's an exciting time for the program. It really is. It's an interesting time because, I do think pre-transfer portal, if they were returning what they had last year, what would have been back if there wasn't a portal, expectations would be extremely high. I mean, if you had a lot of those guys back that still had eligibility that transferred, I think people around here would be completely buzzing. But I do think there's a little bit of let's wait and see from the fan base because there's a lot of names they've never heard of before. But I also think they were in some living rooms and able to get some guys that maybe they wouldn't have got a couple of years ago because of where the program currently is, the success of the program the last 2 years. I think they're able to get a better player nowadays. So I'm excited for August 31st. And August 31st is going to be fun. Game 2 against Liberty. That's the big test, right? I mean, that's a rematch of the title game from last year. And I think we'll find out a lot against SEMO, but we're really going to find out a lot in week 2.
Well, Adam, thank you again for sharing your time and knowledge with us today.
Appreciate you having me. Go Aggies. Thanks so much.
All right. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you are listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.